And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Amanda.
Right.
Our last one this semester.
Yay, we made it. And I just got a notification that my internet's unstable. So awesome. Right, way to go right into this last one here. All right, so I've been looking forward to this discussion all semester, actually. It was one of the first ones that I was able to kind of organize and put together. So Joe and Jan and Emily, I appreciate so much that you guys were so willing to jump in and do this. You were some of my easiest ones to organize here. But I'm really excited to talk about mentoring because in research and in our teaching, because I believe that so much of what we do here at Lipscomb, it's all about the relationship with our students. So I think anytime we can have a discussion with people who are really good at mentoring or people who specialize in mentoring, study the research around mentoring, I think that's really beneficial to us as professors in what we do. So today, as I already mentioned, we have Emily Mofield and Joe DeWeese and Jan Harris here, all to talk about mentoring. And I've set this up as sort of a panel discussion. So I have a list of questions I'm going to ask them. Emily really specializes in the research around mentorship and especially with doctoral students. So I'm going to let her interject as she sees fit to talk about mentoring from a slightly different angle, but I think it will still be helpful when we talk about all of our experiences in mentoring. So I want to start by just letting each of these guys introduce themselves and talk about sort of where they work and what kinds of students they mentor and their research or whatever else it is that they want to give us information about. So jump in, guys.
All right, I'll just jump on in and I'll start. So I'm Emily Mofield. I am a professor, an assistant professor in the College of Education, and I co-direct the Master's in EDS program in Gifted Education and Advanced Academics. That's my specialty area where my research is really around psychosocial skills that promote talent development. So how motivation, self-efficacy, and how those factors really influence, even more so than ability, someone to achieve at high levels. So that's where kind of mentoring falls, how we can cultivate those psychosocial skills. But I'm also very much involved as a EDD professor. So I am advising several research teams as they conduct research in our doctoral program. And though I don't really have like official mentees, I do see my role as I advise my teams as really what I'm doing is I'm being a mentor to those EDD students and preparing them for their next steps.
I'll let Jan go next. Go ahead, Jan.
Okay. Hi, I'm Jan Harris. I teach in the Department of English and Modern Languages, and I work with undergraduate students primarily. I also help students in our department who are preparing for graduate school prepare their portfolio materials for various graduate programs. And I'm trying to think, I'm looking at my notes, and I think that's it. But yeah, and I work with students who are kind of across the board. In English, we have students who apply to graduate programs in law school. We also have students, I work with the creative writing poetry students as well. So preparing students for undergraduate conferences, preparing them to make the leap to graduate school and getting all of those materials together.
So my name is Joe DeWeese. I'm associate professor in the Department of Pharmaceutical Sciences. I've been here since June of 2009. I teach mainly first-year pharmacy students in terms of the type of curriculum I teach is focused on biochemistry as well as some physiology. I teach a little bit of anti-cancer pharmacology and a few other courses in our program. So my teaching is focused on pharmacy students, but I also have a research laboratory. And while we do recruit from our pharmacy student population, we also take a number of undergraduates into our research program. So we have a 10-week summer research experience where we take students. I take probably about 2, sometimes 3 students each summer for that. And then I kind of use that as, kind of as a springboard to keep those students going on through the school year in their research. And right now I have, I guess I have about 4 students working with me right now, soon to be a little bit more than that. I have 1 undergrad. I have a first-year pharmacy student, a second-year pharmacy student, and a fourth-year pharmacy student, all doing kind of different projects with me right now. I'm about to have 2 third-year students coming in for a spring semester elective in research, and so their experience would be a little bit different. So I kind of mentor students in a number of different environments, whether it's a full-time summer experience, a research elective, course-based experience, or just mentoring them throughout the semesters when they're working as they have time, which is kind of what Miriam and Ashley, who are my 2 kind of active research students right now. One's a first-year pharmacy student, the other's an undergrad. She's a senior, and they're excellent students. They're working hard, getting good grades, but they're also trying to figure out, okay, how do I also keep research moving forward? And so what research looks like for us, just to kind of give you a vision for it, is we actually have lab space, and we're talking about doing what I call bench type research, where they're actually running experiments, analyzing results, interpreting the data, etc. So some of what we do is computer based, but a lot of our core work is done at the bench, so to speak, with actual experiments and wet lab experiments and things like that, where they're having to figure out calculations and methods and all those things. So when I think of mentoring, I think of everything from, just mentoring on a, knowledge basis of learning about science and how science works, but also teaching them techniques, methods, how to train them in different ways, how to train students to train other students, right? Which is sometimes what we have to do to keep things moving. So those are some of the areas that I work in.
All right. So I have a list of questions that I'm going to go through for everybody, but if any of you guys who are here have questions along the way, feel free to jump in and ask. I want this to be interactive if possible. So the first question for you guys is, how do you find potential mentees? Are these students that are assigned to you? Do you have any choice in the matter when you're looking for mentees? How does that work for you and your respective departments?
I thought this was such an interesting question because I don't know if I actually find them, as in I go looking for them. I teach a lot of different classes in the major. I'm one of those weird people that likes to teach a lot of different things, and so I think I find students through classwork. And then I've also think it's been kind of fun in the last couple of years. I've been involved with some student organizations on campus, and I've found students, that way as well. But I think as far as like finding mentees, if you want to be involved, because I do feel like being a mentor is a large part of the vocation of being a professor. I think the best way to find them is just to be present, to attend your office hours and be around and stay in contact with the students pretty regularly. And if they know that you're invested in them, then they usually will trust you enough to kind of see if you want to help them in a project, or even just like brainstorm a project with them. Because I feel like some of my best research relationships have been students coming to me with ideas and needing someone to sort of validate their ideas and kind of point them in the next step.
So from my perspective, we have a little bit of a seek and find, as well as kind of putting a fish net out there, seeing who we can who kind of picks at the bait, so to speak. So in our college, we're always trying to bring in research students. we get a number of them from Amanda and her colleagues over in biology who say, hey, go talk to those folks in pharmacy. They might have a research opportunity for you. And so we definitely get a lot of good students, especially the undergrads, coming from folks in biology and chemistry who've pointed them our way. We do have some kind of recruitment type events where we offer through some student organizations like what we call the AAPS, American Association of Pharmaceutical Scientists. There's a student chapter of that has meetings, and we'll request one of those meetings where the students will basically interview the faculty, let us talk about our research projects and advertise that. Now that's mostly pharmacy students that come to those meetings, but some undergrads do come to those meetings as well. And it gives us a chance to kind of showcase our research projects. We've done a couple different things. We've also tried to list, research positions through HR to, kind of student positions through HR. That gets to be a little bit of a headache just in terms of trying to get all that set up and just right. And so a lot of it really comes from word of mouth, whether it's from other faculty, whether it's our students and us talking about it in our pharmacy classes, telling them about research. So we get a lot of student interest from that. And so, we've been fielding those emails because a lot of students know that in the spring we'll have the application for the summer program starting up. And so we'll have a lot of interest over the next 2 months, really, as students kind of hear more about that, get to learn more about that, and then get the chance to apply for the program. So those are just some of the ways that we kind of identify students. Some of it is through a friend of a friend. I'll have students that say, hey, I've got a buddy in this class and they're interested in research. Could they come and shadow us and see what we do? And, so some of it comes about through that way. So just different ways. The two third-year students that I have that are coming to do a research elective in the spring have no previous research experience with me. I don't often take students like that because I want them to kind of have some foundation. But these guys are they're pretty sharp and keen, and I feel like they'll be, there are some tangible projects I could have them work on and make some progress on, and they would learn a lot and benefit from it as well. So try to find that balance, when I'm looking for students. I try not to, so one of the things I do avoid, and this is, selfish on my part, is I don't often take students who are, let's say, juniors and seniors, because it really takes a lot of time and investment to start making real progress. And so it really helps to get students when they're younger, when they're, sophomores. A lot of times that's when we'll kind of first bring them in. And that gives us a couple years of working with them before they graduate. And then we can make real progress on a project. So that really helps us out when we can kind of build that momentum over a period of time and really, move things forward. So I'll stop there.
All right. And then for me, just in the role that I'm in, the research teams that I'm assigned, those are the teams that I really interact with, and I'm able to follow up with them on their dissertation research and say, okay, you're done, but not really. Don't you want to go on and publish this? Or you should go on and present this, and you need to write a practical article on this. And so, so those students who are not just worn out from their dissertation process and they want to keep going, then I'll usually hold their hands through their first research publication and, look over their conference proposals for different things. For my master's and EDS students in gifted education, we don't have too many of those. I mean, it's just a handful right now. That program just started. But I take those relationships really seriously, and I'm looking for opportunities for whatever article I'm writing, or, as we're doing things in class and they're offering great ideas with the strategies that they're implementing with students, I'm looking for opportunities to include them in my own writing projects. So I would say I don't seek them out. They kind of rise to the top as far as what I see they're interested in and how much more they want to persevere with their research.
Awesome. So I'm going to sort of combine the next two questions. I'm asking, what does a successful mentoring relationship look like to you? And then in that process, do you have any defined goals that you set up when you're talking about what a successful relationship looks like when you're mentoring students?
So I'll kind of springboard off of that and Kirsten's question about, how do you help students learn research is more than just, reading literature or something like that. I think that's part of being a successful mentor, right? That's part of mentorship, is helping them get a vision for what does it look like to operate in a particular field or a particular discipline. And so for me, from a science perspective, what I want students to see is, here's what your textbook says, right? But here's what we actually know. And here's how we know what we know. And here's how those experiments work. And so for me, it's helping students develop a critical thinking mindset of understanding kind of what's the layers of evidence underneath what we're putting in our textbooks, and trying to understand as kind of general science versus what we can actually see and explore within experimental science. And for me, in terms of training tools, what that looks like is actually getting them in the lab a lot of times and running those experiments. So I can describe to you what we do. I can show you the data and explain what the images and graphs are depicting for you. But where the rubber really meets the road for most of my students is when they actually run an experiment and get the results and then interpret those results. So when they're able to go through that process several times and really internalize what they're seeing, it's really fun to see kind of that light bulb click on. So for me, when I think about what success looks like when I mentor, it's getting a student to a place where they don't have to come talk to me every 5 minutes and say, am I doing this right? They get to a place where they just run it and they bring the data to me and they say, here, I've got the results. And I've got both Ashley and Miriam are at a place where they can say, hey, I'm going to come in lab and run this experiment. I'll say, great. I won't hear anything from them unless something's wrong. I won't hear anything from them until I get a text or an email that says, here is the image of the gel that I just completed. What do you think? That kind of thing, which is really fun. So I like to get students to a place of somewhat independence in that regard, where I don't have to be over their shoulder. I don't have to be hovering over them. They can go in and run the experiment and bring the results. And oftentimes they can look at it and hopefully get to a place where they can interpret it themselves. They don't have to bring it to me and say, what does this mean? They can just say, hey, I think it worked. Here's what I'm seeing. And that's where I want to get them to in terms of kind of that mental process. There's another side of this too, and that's kind of the professionalism and growth and development of as an individual and as kind of a worker, so to speak. Because some of what we deal with undergrads especially is the, trying to help them learn how to communicate. And it can be things as simple as letting you know when they're going to be in lab and when they have time to run experiments and when they have time to be available. Because some students just kind of may treat it like, well, I'm just kind of going, I'm going to do what, I'll show up when I want to show up or something like that. I try to be really clear with my students, that we need to have an understanding of when you're going to be around, when you're available. Yes, we're going to be flexible. Obviously, in this era, we're extraordinarily flexible, right? We have to be. And I have no problems with that, but I do want to have communication. And so one of my big keys of mentoring is around communication, making sure students understand how to communicate not only what they need, but also what's going on with them, so that I'm not left wondering, are they going to show up today? I thought they were going to run that today. I needed help with this. Are they going to be there for that? Communication is a really big piece of this for me. So yes, thank you, Ryan. Our students are in this, text message, social media society where, they think they'll just pick it up when they want to pick it up and put it down when they want to put it down. Sometimes in research, we have to keep things moving forward, and we don't just have the option just to set it aside and come back to it later. And so I try to impress upon them the importance of certain processes. When we start this, there's a timeline. If we're going to start this on Monday, we need someone to do this on Tuesday, and this on Wednesday, and this on Thursday, and this on Friday. So who's going to be available on what day? Let's communicate around that. So communication is a big key here, and just being able to understand what's expected of them, as well as what I can offer and contribute and what's expected of me. Now, to the question of are there defined goals? I mean, in the sense of, yes, I want to make sure they're communicating and things. Now, are there goals within the research? Yeah, that varies by project. And a lot of times those goals are very fluid because research doesn't always work. Experiments don't always work. Things break, things run out. We have to redo things. And so I try to be pretty flexible. But this semester, I gave my students a couple goals and I said, look, by December, I want us to be at this place. And we're pretty much there. We made it. But what normally would have taken us maybe 2 months has taken us a whole semester, and that's okay. I understand that's kind of where we are right now. So just being able to be flexible, but also to set goals and endpoints. I've figured that out. I had a couple research students that I didn't really give them any goals and they floundered, and I've given others too many goals and they were crushed. And so you got to find that happy medium of give them enough that they're attaining it and moving toward it, but not so much that you crush them. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, I really love this question. I have to shout out Amanda on this because she gave us the questions in advance, and that was just so helpful because I've been looking through them and thinking about them and taking notes because I'm a professional nerd. But I love this idea of defined goals for mentorship because I feel like this reaches into sort of the philosophy of it. Because I think we've all been in meetings where people have been very derisive about undergraduate research or whether undergraduates can do research or not. And those are always kind of slightly awkward conversations because I do believe undergraduates have something to contribute to the academic conversation. And for me, when I'm mentoring students, my goal is always to try to establish a level of agency or help the student find some agency in the discipline and to sort of begin to exercise their talents and gifts in the discipline because every student is different. And I think especially for today and in the job market today, we're trying to find ways that we can kind of call forth, or at least I am, the individual talents that are in that student and help develop that rather than having sort of this is what a perfect student looks like. Because our students are coming from so many different backgrounds and they have so many stressors on them that many of us didn't even have or weren't even the technology that Joe was talking about that weren't necessarily even around when we were undergraduates. And so I think kind of focusing on how can in this mentoring partnership, how can I, in some ways, work myself out of a job? How can I create enough agency in the student that their curiosity and their intellectual questions are sparked by what we're producing in this session? So I think the idea is not just that you get them to a presentation, but really that you're encouraging those habits of professionalism and scholarship that will benefit the student beyond the immediate project that you're working on.
Yes, and I went on and typed some of my responses in the chat. But as when I'm working with doctoral students and through their research process, well, I'll just talk about this. Some things to really consider as we're mentoring, from what I know from the literature, is that you want to prepare students ahead of time and be very explicit for what this means. We want to state the expectations up front. We want to talk about the type of feedback that we're going to provide. I like to prepare my students. I teach the quantitative statistics classes, and people are scared of that kind of thing. And I just like to prepare them ahead of time. Mindset matters more than anything here. Have an open mind here. We have to handle what it means to be afraid of content, but push through that discomfort. So I like to have a conversation up front of what this endeavor is going to entail, and there could be discomfort. I sound like I'm really harsh and everything, but I'd like to just go on and tell everyone things can be hard. And of course, the overall goal is to build that access to content expertise to really make sure they're seeing the tools for the discipline and understanding how, like the other panelists have said already, but help them see that what they're doing in their research or what we're doing with my gifted education students, this this translates to the real world. As Joe already mentioned, this is what your textbook says, but this is what educational research really looks like. We often can't meet assumptions with our tests. We often have to redo things because of our sample sizes. I think my biggest thing is teaching those psychosocial skills, teaching them that part of growing up, part of making it in a field, part of progressing towards expertise and being a creative contributor to society is that you will have setbacks. That this is just not a point A to point B. That when you try to publish, you're going to get some heavy feedback and you're likely going to be rejected. And so I like to really make it a point that how we cope with these setbacks is really what matters. And from the research that I know, how we cope with those setbacks is what keeps us from achieving at the highest levels than just achieving at an okay level. Like that's really the difference. And so many people who write their first article and it's rejected will never try again. And they really need a mentor to help them see, like, this is just part of it. This is what it means to be in this field. And so cultivating resilience, helping them deal with that discomfort, showing them the emails that I get from journal articles, like what the feedback really looks like, so that they can understand the feedback I'm giving you here isn't to be harsh or mean, like it's to help you grow. This is what academe is like. I think that's really important. And
If
then
I can
also,
just bounce in on that, I just want to
Yeah.
ditto what Emily is saying, because I do the same thing with my creative writers in the advanced poetry classes. We do a whole day about what good rejection is, because we know, like statistically, like they, and that it's better to have some skin in the game and be rejected than to just, sit around coffee shops not being able to feed yourself because you never submitted anything. So we do I think it's so important. And I feel like when you're trying to nurture students, that I love what Emily's saying. And I just want to support her in that, because that vulnerability, I think the first time I did a good rejection day, I thought, okay, now I want to crawl under the table. But once I showed the students, like, this is what it looks like when I get stuff, it was such a really positive learning experience. And I always say students are your best teachers. Like, it was positive for them, but also positive for me, because it just reminded me of this community that we're trying to build in the academy. So yeah, totally.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. And I also think another goal that I have is just to model organizational skills. Like, it's a lot to handle what we're doing, And so I like to share with students, okay, this is my writing agenda. My goal is to write one page single spaced every day. And I actually have this Excel spreadsheet, and I don't write that every day, but I try every week to have 7 pages single spaced done. And, there's a lot of reading before you write. And anyways, I try to just share, okay, this is how I approach things. 1 month I'll focus on this, and another month I'll focus on this. I think they need to see that. So that's another goal. And there's another little acronym that I've used in some writing called TEAM. It's in some of the work I've done on collaboration, how teachers collaborate, but I think it's very applicable here. But it's setting this standard of, okay, we're trust. How do we trust each other? What do you want to engage in, and how will we do that? Let's align our beliefs and assumptions of what this is going to look like, as Joe and Jan have discussed. But here's the most important part: maintain. And so I think we have to be courageous enough throughout any relationship, mentoring or collaboration or whatever, to stop and say, how is this really going? And to invite feedback, and to say, is there anything I'm doing that's keeping you from progressing? Or is there anything that I can be doing more to support you? and then to encourage the other person to also invite that feedback and to say, what can I be doing differently to grow? And so if that M is actually discussed periodically, through these meetings, that's really important, because if it's not, then it's just a lot of like, oh, I can't believe they did that, or they're getting on my nerves, or, we have to be very explicit with our expectations and check in on them.
Taking notes and trying to write at the same time. All right, so just to kind of along these same lines, and I think some of this has been discussed already. So if you don't have anything to add, that's fine. But the next thing I have is to ask if you guys ever have specific items or development plans in mind for your specific mentees. And this question, I'm kind of thinking outside of the specific project at hand, but more for like professional development goals, those sorts of things for students. Do you ever work on those with your students?
So I do on several different levels. So regardless of what project my students work on, I have some experiments that I want them to learn no matter what, because it teaches them the basic principles of how we do what we do, the basic principles behind our experiments and our research. And so kind of there's an experimental side of things where I want them to learn these assays so that they have, a certain skill set as a basis, as a foundation. So there's kind of that side of developing their just basic research skill sets from an experimental perspective. Beyond that, obviously we have them, reading articles and literature, engaging in the literature. So learning how to read papers, learning how to understand what those papers are saying. And sometimes during the summer research program, we've had kind of weekly meetings, or however frequently we're able to do it, where sometimes we'll have a paper that we just discuss as a group, kind of like a journal club, and teach them how to analyze the data in the paper and think through, how did they do that experiment? How did they come to that conclusion based upon those results? Do you question that? What else would you like to see? So some kind of critical thinking and the ability to engage the literature. We also have I try to have students, submit something to the Student Scholar Symposium each year. I think that's a really fun experience. Initially, we did a lot of posters, but the last few years, I've really had them focus on oral presentations. Posters are fun, and I think every student should experience a poster, especially if you're coming from a science and engineering type background. But there's something about a presentation where you're up in front of an audience and you have to deliver a certain amount of information in a very concise time and be ready to answer questions. I feel like there's another level that's added to it when you put that on them. I think you can gain from both experiences, but like I said, the last few years I've really tried to steer students toward those presentations for the Student Scholar Symposium, having them be oral presentations. I try to, when possible, take students to meetings. Obviously, that's not always possible, but I guess the last time I did that would have been 2019. I took one of my students who was about to graduate. We got to go to a conference down in Florida, and he got to present a poster there at a major conference where there's 10, 15,000 people, whatever it was. And so that was a good experience for him to see, as well as to go and attend talks and things like that. Of course, we have all of our pharmacy students have to develop a CV, so curriculum vitae. And so just making sure that everybody's, developing that and understands the components of it and are cataloging those things. So those are some of the things that we try to do. A lot of our writing, I know Tracy asked about authorship, and I put a little note about that. In terms of writing, I do want them to learn to write and critique. So I have them critique grants that I submit. I have them critique manuscripts that are being submitted. They don't get on a manuscript just because they reviewed it and provided some critique. I may put them in the acknowledgement section, thank you for reading this or whatever. But in terms of being an author, I expect them to have actually contributed kind of substantively to the actual project and to the data that's in the manuscript. If they haven't done that, then I'm not gonna include them as an author. Sometimes that's easier than others. I've had projects over the last couple of years that have spanned a number of students, meaning it wasn't just one student came in, did the project and published it. I've had a number of projects like that, but I have some projects now where there might be 5, 6, 7 different students involved. And so I've had to decide, okay, when I publish this, these are the students that get to be part of that work. And so I've had to kind of create those buckets and figure out where does that fit, and also communicate to the students, here's what's going on. So there's definitely some developmental things that I do there, that I try to make sure students get exposed to certain things. They get to, submit things, they get to go to conferences when possible, because I think those all help them, grow and develop in their own way. So a lot of times they'll not be excited about having to go present, right? But afterward, they're thankful for the opportunity, and they recognize, the growth that they experience from that.
Yeah, I'd just like to say I'm hugely biased towards the Student Scholars Symposium, and I think it's a great experience. And the way that we've approached research, or at least I have from a departmental level, is it's an excellent tool for students at any level as an undergraduate, but especially catching them at that sophomore, junior level. And what we've done a lot of is sort of get them into Student Scholars early, so it gets them over that kind of psychological hurdle of, I have to read in front of an audience. And then that moves them to be a little bit more bold to apply to national conferences. And we've had students go to national and international conferences from our department. And I think that would have been impossible without the support and leadership of Student Scholars at the undergraduate level. So I think it's an incredibly important thing. And I always tell my students, you don't think this is special because we have it every year, but I've taught at 3 other universities where they did not have this kind of infrastructure for research, and it's really an opportunity for those students. As far as, I kind of deal with 2 groups. So I deal with creative writers, and I also deal with literary criticism. So when I'm going through with the writers, what I'm doing, we do a lot of the workshopping, revision in class. Some of that professional development happens in the curriculum. But as far as like mentoring for advanced research, it's teaching them how to put a collection together. It's teaching them how to read. There are a lot of people that are screaming poetry into the void of YouTube very loudly these days. So teaching them how not to do that sometimes is important. And also getting them comfortable, even with creative presentations, you have a Q&A afterwards. So I do a lot of, with both sets of students, like presenting in my office or presenting in front of a class, and then modeling like what advanced academic questions look like, so they can learn how to prepare and prep for those rather than not having any preparation at all. We do abstract writing, and abstracts look different depending on which group that I'm working with, proposals, research proposals. And then I also do a lot of visual literacy work with students that are doing literary criticism, how to organize slides, how to have slides as a supplement. No one likes to have the PowerPoint read to them, like we all know this. So it's creating PowerPoint that provides a supplement for the audience, so that if the audience kind of wanders off, they can come back and follow the presentation when the student's reading the paper. So I'm doing a lot of things like that with the students. But I want to stress something else, which is, I think it's really important to have, as Joe and Emily have talked about, when you're developing student talent, to have a consistent schedule, to try to have them on a schedule and have like digestible benchmarks, because you kind of can't, and I used to do this, you can't say to them like, go make a PowerPoint and come back. I mean, you have to sort of give them a little bit of grounding if they don't know how to do that effectively. A lot of times I'll say like, well, have you done PowerPoint presentations before? Like, what do you know about visual literacy? Like, how much text should be on a slide, and that, like, those leading questions, so we can understand what the student knows. But then kind of giving them a model is super helpful. If you have good student presentations, I'd encourage you to get that student's permission to make them anonymous, and then to keep them so that other students can use them, because that helps as well. But just having those kind of like schedule, I really just try to have a scheduled meeting with the student. It's helpful for me because we all know how busy we are. And I teach a 4-4, and I teach 4 different preps every semester. So like I have to have a schedule to keep any sense of what is actually happening in my life. So I think I do that. And then also like it's helpful for the student because it breaks down that process. And you're always going to have one or two that are just doing it the night before. That's just kind of pragmatically inevitable. But I think it helps them see that they don't have to go down that road if you model sort of a scaffolded research development for them.
And I think I'm going to speak from just what we know about the development of expertise and the role of mentors as far as some professional development. Beyond what everyone else has already said, I think emphasizing reflective thought or emphasizing like metacognition. So, all right, so we did all this, but let's think back. What processes did we use and what could we have done better, and to really think about our thought processes that were involved and how can we visualize that. I think that would be well, the research shows that making that abstract thought process concrete and talking through that's the invisible thing that's going on in the expertise's head that the novice doesn't know. And so when a novice explains, okay, so this is how I went about this, and they articulate that, then the experts can help guide their thinking and actually say, well, this is how I think about it. And then as far as going to conferences, when I think about my own personal development of expertise and how I've grown over the past 10 years, I am so thankful for my mentors. And I actually like to think, okay, what was it like when I knew nothing? And that's how my students are. And what do they explicitly need to be told? And when you go to a conference, it's even more than just presenting. It's like, if you can go with your mentor to those little network meetings or these little mingling things where you are really engaging with high level people in the field. That's when I grew exponentially, when my mentor would introduce me to Joe Renzulli or these famous people in my field. Like that's awesome. And so I would encourage any mentor to encourage their mentee to try to rub shoulders with big people in the field and to pay really close attention to trends in the field, that whatever we're writing, is this kind of like outdated, what was going on 5 years ago, or is this really fitting the context of where the field is going? And I see a lot of that with gifted education, because no longer are you're gifted or you're not, but giftedness is talent is a malleable construct that is developed. So yes, so those would be my things.
All right. Well, we are starting to run out of time. So unfortunately, I have like several more questions, but I don't think we're going to have time to get to all of them today. But one of the last questions that I'll ask here is, you each have a list of the questions that are remaining that we didn't get to. So I'm going to let the three of you just take a couple of minutes to, you can either address one of the questions that I didn't ask for yourself, whatever you think is most important, or if there's something completely different that you all want to add in to wrap us up for today. I'll give you guys time to do that.
Yeah, as I was looking at that list, Amanda, I thought about, one of the questions you asked about kind of the biggest obstacles and things like that. I would say from my perspective, that would be time, having enough time, both in terms of just my time to be able to work with the student, but also in terms of having a student over a period of time. So at least in the area of science where I am, there's not a lot you can get done in, let's say, a few weeks or a semester. You really need longitudinal time, multiple semesters, summer experiences before you really gain a lot of traction. That's where I see the most growth in students. And for us to take a project from a concept to a publication oftentimes takes us 2 years. So in grad school, that would have been maybe 6 months for me. But here it's about 2 years for that project to mature and get all the data, especially when students are kind of the prime ones doing the experiments and driving things. So it just takes time. And so if I have a student for a short period of time, it's really hard to make that traction and to keep things going. And, you know, for my work right now, I'm completely funded off of external grant that I have. You know, I don't ask the department really for any money for the supplies and to pay for students. And so that's another piece of this, is just being able to keep it funded to keep things going. Now, I have some students that are willing to volunteer, and that's great. But at the end of the day, the type of work we do costs money, and you have to have supplies, you have to have equipment. I prefer to pay students because I want them to feel that they're, you know, not only learning from it, but they get another benefit from it as well. So overall, I have not had any real major negative ones other than in terms of experiences. It's just primarily, you know, if they can't communicate, or to Emily and Jan's comments earlier, if they don't have organizational skills, trying to help them develop those. You really have to try to find that out on the front end. With research students, I have to try to be selective, because just because someone loves science doesn't mean that they're going to be great in performing it. And so you really have to learn to know what to look for in your students and what you're interested in. And I try to be very upfront with them, you know, that I want them to see this as a longitudinal experience, that once they're in, I want them to stay committed to that, that I have expectations of them, and I will also provide them with things as part of this deal. And so, you know, I try to be pretty upfront about that with them. So I hope that's helpful. I have to jump off here in a minute to get to another class, but thank you, Amanda, Emily, Jan, and everybody for having us to do this. So thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
I think what I would encourage you is every student has some giftedness and something that you can share with them, and they can teach you and you can teach them. And I think realizing that research, even if you have outcomes in mind, every student's kind of path is going to be a little bit different. And for me, the best advice I ever got was to listen more than I talk. And I think, like, when you're working with students, especially with research, it's that listening to the student, trying to figure out and ask them questions and get them involved in the process. And I think also to remember, like, there's not one perfect student researcher that we're trying to manufacture and send into the world. I think that's really important, especially when I'm working with creative students, giving them a sense of, like, the range of what they can do, and that their writing doesn't have to look like anyone else's and doesn't have to look like mine. I always tell my students, it's not a cult, it's a poetry class. Like, I'm not trying to create like 1,000 little Jans. And I think, like, that's really important, because we want to have, we need a new generation of scholars who are going to challenge us. And part of what we're doing is trying to cultivate that now.
That's so insightful. I love that. Yes, we do need to listen to our students, their voices. Yes, they allow us to grow as well. So my biggest kind of takeaway that I would share would be to really promote their sense of self-efficacy. You know, so many of the students that I work with, they have fear about the process, and so just helping them develop that sense of self-efficacy. And so we know that achievement happens from when these three factors are involved: self-efficacy. They see that they're supported, so it's environmental perception, and the third thing is that they value what they're doing, so we would assume that. But so really help them see that even you're going to have obstacles, and I want to help you prepare for these obstacles, and assuring that if they do fail or mess up, it's not due to their ability, but it's just that they can change their strategy. And so helping students prepare for that plan B. If something works, hey, it doesn't work, hey, it's okay, because we already have this other if then plan. So there's this great little strategy I love. It's called WHOOP. And there's like scientific research behind it. But anyways, the acronym is WISH. What is your wish? What do you really want? Outcome, let's envision these positive outcomes that we have. But if we stop there, a person is less likely to actually achieve their goal if that's all we do is visualize success. So what we have to do is contrast that positive vibe with angst. And so the next O is obstacle. And so visualize now all the things that will get in the way of your goal, and we will make plans for those goals. So the P is plan, if, then. And so it's an awesome psychological strategy that you kind of go on this autopilot. You don't have to think, oh no, this didn't work. What am I going to do? We already have a plan. And it actually increases motivation, because that negative feeling, when we think about the obstacles that will get in the way, it creates this angst, this contrast, where you want to get back to that nice feeling of achieving your goal. So great psychological science behind this strategy. So that's a quick, easy thing to think about, but preparing students for the real world of obstacles would be my advice.
I love that. Thank you so much. Okay, guys, I really appreciate you all coming today and sharing your insights about mentoring students. That was really, it was nice to hear. Just even sometimes that we have the same obstacles, you know, those sorts of things are, it's nice. So thank you all for that. As far as RCR for next semester, guys, we are done. We are 6 in for the semester. We have 6 left next semester. So I want to show you all just very quickly. I know we don't have much time, but I've got a little thing here. If I can get my screen share up for just a second. So next semester, for 2021, these are the tentative dates, and I will we'll get this put up for everyone so you guys can see it. Now, the speakers and topics that I am working on lining up right now, I've got David Wilson. He's going to talk about intellectual property. I've got a little star by his name, and I'll tell you guys why in just a second. Kathy Hargis is going to come and do some sort of conversation on risk management. And Dwayne Tao is going to, from the College of Computing and Technology, is going to come talk about protecting personal information for those of us who do research with humans. So those types of things. And then some other topics. I'm so glad that there were some questions about authorship, because the 3 other topics that I'm wanting to cover next semester are Chem Lab and occupational safety. Kathy is in the process of hiring someone to replace Dennis Steverson. And so whoever that person is, she has already promised will come talk to us about chem safety, lab safety, and occupational safety for those of us who are in the sciences or whatever. I also would love to have a conversation about authorship with students in the STEM and non-STEM fields. So thank you so much for asking those questions today, because it helps me know that this is a topic that's going to be helpful. And then the other ones, I've got some leads on someone to talk to us about the peer review process, or I might have Robin come back and do a second grant session that's a little bit more advanced, and maybe have some faculty come in who have worked with Robin and the grants office to get grants and kind of talk about their experiences through that process, or to talk more specifically about how to find grants and those kinds of questions for Lipscomb resources. So David has a star here because Craig has decided to hijack David to do this topic as a faculty meeting instead of an RCR. So I do not have the date of that yet, but we will essentially lose one of these dates and instead count that faculty meeting as one of our RCR meetings for next semester. So we'll be down to 5 of these plus the faculty meeting with David Wilson, whenever that's going to be. So, all right. And I'll get this, we can send this out to you guys so you have sort of a list of what's going on next semester for those of you who are interested. And as it gets firmed up, I will let you all have that information.
Yeah, and I'll get that added to our CTL scheduling system. And then whenever we send out the emails about our CTL sessions for the spring semester, they'll all be over there as well. But this time we'll make sure to put more details for all the sessions for you, so you know who is presenting and what the topic is as well.
We'll try, as long as I can
Yes.
get people to confirm
Yes.
early enough.
Remember flexibility badges this
Yes.
year. So
2021. That's the
Yes.
goal. It's just be flexible.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yes. And the sessions are recorded as well. And we are working on a system for you all to be able to access any of those, which you'll get more information about. So thank you all so much. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Emily, and
Thanks,
Jan,
Jan.
and Joe
Thank
for
you.
sharing. Great session. So have a lovely rest of your day today.
Thank
Bye,
you.
guys. Thank you.